Welcome back to Lion Recaps. Today I will explain episodes 5 and 6 of the series The Good Doctor, released in 2017. Kevin Wilkes arrives at his father's doorstep, but his father is upset to see him. He doesn't let him come in. Kevin's mother died 5 weeks ago, and Kevin missed her burial and failed to call his father because he was too busy in Thailand. Kevin hears him collapse in the kitchen and rushes him to St. Bonaventure, where Dr. Sean works. Dr. Sean arrives to work early this time, and Dr. Neil jokes about using a teleportation device. Dr. Sean replies sarcastically, impressing Dr. Neil and Claire, briefing Mr. Wilkes, Kevin's father. Mr. Wilkes has been diagnosed with having abdominal pain. While Dr. Neil briefs the team, Mr. Wilkes cries out in pain. They all head into his room except Dr. Sean, whose attention has been caught by a young boy with an arm injury who looks so much like his late brother Steve, who died in an accident. Dr. Sean looks on and remembers his brother in an emotional montage. After running a diagnosis on Mr. Wilkes, Dr. Kalu and Dr. Claire examine his results and develop theories about pancreatitis. Still, Dr. Neil suspects there's something they're missing and dismisses their ideas. He instead orders them to dig deeper. Dr. Sean heads over to the boy whom he learns is Evan Gallico and looks him over. Dr. Sean is determined to prevent him from dying. He checks his vision with a series of finger movements and orders a CT. Just then, Dr. Aaron Glassman comes by, expressing how much Evan looks just like Steve. He asks Dr. Sean how he feels about it, but Dr. Sean claims he feels fine. Steve is dead, Dr. Sean replies. Later, the residents come in to tell Mr. Wilkes that he has a lesion on his pancreas. It could be a benign cyst or cancer. Dr. Sean watches Evan as he enters the tube for a CT. They talk back and forth as Dr. Sean completes the scan. Dr. Sean talks about how his autism prevents him from understanding social cues, and Evan tells him he used to know a boy who had autism. The boy died in an accident. Dr. Sean tells him he also knows his brothers who died. Dr. Sean looks at the scans as they talk. Evan has a tumor on the side of his ear. Dr. Neil comes in, furious. He isn't happy that Dr. Sean took off and is conducting a scan for what he assumed was only a broken bone until he sees the scan. Dr. Sean heads out to the waiting room to meet with Evan's parents and breaks the news to them. But they already know, and they don't want Evan to know. They had already been told by a previous oncologist that Evan had only 1 year to live. That was 7 months ago. At lunch, Dr. Sean and Dr. Aaron sit and have lunch, talking about Evan. Dr. Sean thinks Evan should know about his condition, but Dr. Aaron tells him not everyone can handle the truth. Dr. Sean thinks Evan would want to see the truth. Dr. Sean has a flashback to when Steve wanted to know what he would get for his birthday, and Dr. Sean tells him, much to his brother's anger. Dr. Sean asks Claire Brown to come into Evan's room and tell the boy he needs pins since he cannot tell him the truth. Dr. Sean cannot lie to Evan. Dr. Sean then heads into the room to see Evan wrap his arm. Evan asks why Dr. Sean needed Claire to break the news, and Dr. Sean tells him Claire communicates better with people than he does. Evan knows Dr. Sean is lying about something. Dr. Sean then tells Evan he has cancer, but Evan already knows that. He tells Dr. Sean how he figured it out after Googling his symptom on the internet after recovering from a sore leg. His parents had bought him a PS4 after, so he knew something was wrong, because kids don't get gaming systems for growing pains. Evan tells Dr. Sean it's okay, and he isn't afraid to die. Evan asks Dr. Sean about Leia DeLallo, whom Dr. Sean claimed he liked. Claire and Dr. Sean talk as they work on paperwork. Dr. Sean is worried about Evan and is going over Evan's chart. Claire and Kalu discover that Mr. Wilkes has tapeworms in his brain. Kalu talks to Dr. Aaron, who used to be a neurosurgeon, and they come up with a game plan, assuring Mr. Wilkes of his safety with them. Dr. Sean is still working, and he cannot stop thinking about Evan. After going through a pile of books and charts, he discovers that Evan doesn't have cancer. The following day, Dr. Sean meets Neil at his parking spot and talks about the news. Still, Neil isn't optimistic and warns Dr. Sean against giving Evan and his parents false hope. Still full of optimism, Dr. Sean heads to see Dr. Aaron. Dr. Aaron tells him he can do some procedures without telling the parents and advises him not to get caught. Dr. Kalu talks to Mr. Wilkes, who's mad at his son for not taking over the family business. Kalu tells him that he also chose to be a doctor over his family business because he wanted to do what he loved. Dr. Sean sees Evan and pretends to carry out some procedures, but Evan can tell he is lying. Dr. Sean opens up about the possibility that Evan doesn't have cancer but wants to make sure, and Evan agrees it is worth a try. Evan's parents arrive suddenly and want to know what's going on. Dr. Sean can't lie, so he blurts out the truth. The father is angry and tells Dr. Sean to get out. Evan begins coughing up blood, and Dr. Sean calls for the nurses. Evan undergoes surgery and Dr. Sean asks Neil to assist, but Neil refuses. Dr. Sean watches from the gallery as he and Dr. Aaron talk. If Dr. Sean is wrong, he's in trouble. Kalu sees Kevin in the waiting area and tells him that he needs to talk to his father and tell him the truth about his girlfriend and why he ran away. Kevin opens up to his father as he is wheeled into surgery. Kevin admits that he is afraid to take over the family business because he thought he would fail. Claire finds something in Evan during Evan's surgery and calls Dr. Neil over to see. Meanwhile, Dr. Sean waits with Evan's parents in the waiting room and has a flashback of when he gave Steve a book for his birthday, To Kill a Mockingbird. The surgery is over, and Neil comes out to speak with Evan's parents. He tells them that they discovered lesions on his ribs and that his osteosarcoma has metastasized into his chest. The news is heartbreaking, even for Dr. Sean, who listens. During Mr. Wilkes' surgery, Dr. Aaron locates the tapeworm in his brain and takes it out, impressing Kalu. Evan talks with his parents and tells them that he has known them for a long time. Dr. Sean watches from outside the room. Later, Dr. Sean and Evan talk, and Evan thanks him. Dr. Sean is upset that he was wrong and asks for a favor. He wants to read something to him, and Evan agrees. He reads to him the book he gave Steve. Evan listens. Afterwards, Dr. Sean leaves him with the book and thanks him for letting him read. He walks away with tears in his eyes. Dr. Sean and the rest of the crew receive a call that there was a massive accident, and 24 passengers are being brought in. The patients are brought in, and one has an object in his neck. Dr. Brown is assigned to her, but she is fidgety. Dr. Neil assists her. Dr. Sean is tensed as a patient with a damaged artery on the leg is brought to him, prompting Nurse Friday to grab his arm, but he pulls back, confusing everyone. After a moment, Dr. Sean calls out all the medical supplies needed, and everyone wonders what Dr. Sean is doing. He tells them he's making a riboa to occlude the damaged artery and stop it from bleeding. The patient stabilizes and everyone is impressed, including Dr. Aaron. Dr. Marcus stops Dr. Kalu from misdiagnosing a burn patient and operates on him himself. Dr. Glassman is examining a patient but doesn't have an ultrasound machine, worrying Dr. Neil, who thinks he might pierce the man's heart. Still, he proceeds anyways and laughs as Dr. Neil mentions that Dr. Sean's riboa could have gone really wrong. Glassman asks him how long Sean will have to prove himself to him. As Dr. Neil and Dr. Claire prepare for surgery, he understands that this was her first trauma, but reminds her she needs to think a little more like Sean. Dr. Kalu is removing the burnt skin from Celeste, his patient's neck. Celeste is crying about her condition and demands a mirror since Dr. Kalu won't even look her in the eye. She wants to know how bad it is, sobbing at the image. Dr. Neil takes Sean to Marco's family to tell them the doctors cannot fix the leg, and their only choice is to amputate it. His bride breaks down crying, as this is their wedding day. In the ER, Sean wants to use one of the computers, but all the doctors take them before he can get to any. Jessica Preston and Neil are asked about their plans for marriage, but they haven't figured it out. Jessica prefers a beach wedding, but Dr. Neil's family likes churches better. Dr. Aaron listens just as Dr. Sean rushes off after Nurse Friday asks him if he wants to love, and he says no. Sean finally finds a computer but has to beg Dr. Claire for it. He begins to visualize any options to save his patient's leg, but there are no options. Claire suggests replacing the entire femur, and they get to it, while Dr. Neil watches as they build a femur out of titanium. Dr. Neil is undecided about their suggestion as he needs to think on this, but still has 7 trauma tags to deal with. Claire tells Dr. Neil it was her idea, but he doesn't believe her. He has a hard time believing she's brilliant because he's known her for 6 months. Dr. Kalu is confused about what to say to comfort Celeste, so he sits outside alone. Dr. Claire suggests that he doesn't need to talk, but listen to her because she's afraid, and he is her only escape. Dr. Neil and Dr. Sean go to see Marco's family about implanting the fake femur on Marco. Dr. Sean tells them it's the first time that he's doing this surgery and admits there is a 10% chance of dying. Marco's mother immediately refuses, but his fiancée says Marco would want them to take the opportunity. Dr. Neil says his parents are the next of kin, and they are the ones who decide, so Marco's father tells them to amputate his leg. While Dr. Neil and Dr. Sean prep for surgery, Dr. Sean asks why having someone to love is so important to everyone when Dr. Neil's wedding comes up in their discussion. Jessica enters and tells them they can't go forward with the surgery because she has filed an injunction to stop it. Claire talks to her parents, Numi, about the neck surgery and how lucky she is to be alive. She extubates Numi and she asks about her wife, Jenna. Claire checks the list with her and Jenna's name isn't on it. Jessica tells Dr. Neil that Judge Singh is en route. Still, Dr. Neil reminds Jessica that Marco's parents' decision is not his fiancée's. Still, she objects when he says all parents love their children no matter what. Jessica gets defensive. wondering if Dr. Neil would want his parents to make such decisions over her. While they argue, Dr. Sean reminds them that they have 3 hours before Marco's leg will die. Dr. Kalu returns to Celeste and offers to show her a movie, but she says a funny film won't change this for her. She mocks him about having all the answers for her. Meanwhile, Marco's parents and fiancé meet with Judge Singh, and they debate replacing Marco's femur. Marco's fiancé reveals to his parents that they met at rehab, where Marco was recovering from his drug addiction. Claire learns that Jenna hasn't been around since the accident and suddenly realizes Jenna could still be at the crash site and goes back to find Jenna. Claire finds Jenna unconscious. Dr. Kalu talks to Dr. Andrews about Celeste, who is eligible for an experimental burn treatment with tilapia fish skin. Still, Dr. Andrew tells him the process for approval could take 3 months. Dr. Kalu was hoping he could expedite it to 2 hours. Dr. Andrews, however, applauds his initiative. Claire arrives at the hospital with Jenna, whom she has administered some first aid treatment. Dr. Glassman tells Claire she made a good call. Dr. Kalu returns to the isolation room, informing Celeste that the tilapia skins are going to the hospital. She won't need skin grafts. Dr. Sean is brought in for questions by Judge Singh, but he is so slow to respond, frustrating everyone. Dr. Sean notices Marco's toes are changing color and instructs them to call Dr. Neil as he is clotting. Judge Singh decides the titanium femur be implanted on Marcos since his parents know him only as their child and may be irrational. In contrast, his fiancée knows him as a man. Dr. Glassman allows Claire to perform the surgery on Jenna with him, but she does not survive. Dr. Kalu begins to lay the tilapia skins on Celeste, just as Dr. Sean helps Dr. Neil with the surgery on Marco. The surgery worked, and the family is grateful for saving his leg. Dr. Kalu tells Celeste her tilapia skin is only for 6 months, allowing her new skin a chance to grow in with minimal scarring. She thanks him, admitting she misjudged him, but he says she judged him right. Claire watches her parents sleep when Dr. Glassman comes in, realizing she hasn't told her that Jenna is dead. He takes Claire out of the room and tells her she made a mistake that cost Jenna her life. Claire screwed up Jenna's intubation. Dr. Aaron tells her to go home and get some rest. Dr. Andrews joins Dr. Kalu in the elevator. We learn that Dr. Kalu donated to the burn unit of the San Diego Community Hospital to get Celeste's experimental treatment. Dr. Aaron informs Numi that Jenna has died, and Claire watches. Jessica and Dr. Neil kiss as they leave the hospital. Outside the hospital, Dr. Aaron and Dr. Sean talk about him not wanting love, and he mentions that he loved his brother and his rabbit. Still, they're dead, and so he can't love them anymore. He reaffirms that he doesn't want to love, and they go get breakfast. That was all from this video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.